Good evening. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time here tonight. Last March when the pandemic first happened, I don't think any of us thought we would be where we are today. We're all doing the best we can collaboratively to adapt the plans according to the schedules that change because of the buildings, because of the virus. And the city and the district have a shared goal, and that goal is working together to make our buildings the safest possible, to ensure our testing program is able to tell us what's happening with the virus in each of our schools and when, and to make sure that our training and our protocols and our PPE are in place and ready to go in order to protect everyone. It's going to be these three things: the buildings, the testing, and those protocols that are going to work together to ensure our students and our staff are safe. We know we want to thank all of the parents and the guardians. We know that since last March, remote learning, even though we've done our best with it, it's not in-person learning. And it's been disruptive to you, to your lives, to our students. We're eager to get our students back to us in person, and we're committed to working this summer and to working next fall and all throughout next year to supporting our students in any way that we can. So tonight we're hoping to give you some additional information, and we look to see that over these next few months that there'll be more information coming regularly as we continue to work through the building challenges and we continue and begin our hybrid in-person learning. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our mayor.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. I do want to first, before I begin the presentation, let everyone know we do have interpretation services that is available for Portuguese, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. Many of you are joining us here via the city's website or on YouTube Live. At the end of the presentation, we'll be taking questions. You can submit your questions at any time during the presentation utilizing the Q&A function here and on this screen or this portal. Or if you're on YouTube, we'll be monitoring the comment section as well and asking those questions. We'll try to make sure we capture the diversity of questions. If we don't get to anything this evening, we apologize in advance and we will get back to you. And feel free, as always, as many of you have had, directly correspond with us either on the school or city side for more information, for questions or comments. Thank you again for joining us. Before I begin the presentation, next slide, please. I do want to introduce, I'll just mention them and you'll hear from them when they actually present. From the City of Somerville, we have with us Mr. Omar Bukili. He's the incident commander for the city's COVID-19 incident command system. Mr. Doug Kress, the Director of Health and Human Services. Mr. Rich Rage, many of you are familiar with Rich. He's the Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management. And Ms. Kristen Stelgis, the Director of Somerset, but also in terms of the incident command system, she's the head of the planning division in the COVID response team. And I'll ask the superintendent to introduce these school panelists.
Great. We also have some school staff here tonight to be able to help with questions. Dr. Jeff Curley, many of you know, who is our Chief of Staff and has filled so many roles throughout the pandemic. Mr. Andre Green, who is our school committee chair. Chad Mazur, our assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and assessment. Many of the parents have spoken with him over the course of the pandemic. Ms. Davila, Sarah Davila, who is our administrator in charge of our L programming, our multilingual learner education, and our family and community partnerships. Liz Doncaster, our director of student services for SPS. Susanna Hernandez Morgan, who is our chief communications and development officer and someone who works tirelessly on sending out all of our communications. Dr. Q, Mr. Q, who is our early education director. Rosanna Parabello, who many of you know from community schools. She's the director of that program. And Christine Trevisoni, who is our special education director for SPS. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us tonight.
I'll take it back. Thank you, Superintendent. Again, as we begin this presentation, I do want to just emphasize and reiterate the importance of how we're seeking to build a safe and really a sustainable reopening of our schools. And as we mentioned in previous meetings, we have all seen and heard the stories and reports of the many school districts locally and really across the nation that have had to open up their classrooms, but really only to cycle through numerous reclosings and reopenings when there's evidence of an outbreak or new cases. I don't completely understand what every family is going through, especially those who have high need kids. But I want you to know we are acutely aware that you're all shouldering an incredible burden. Our parents are especially dealing with the hardships of the pandemic and making sure their kids, our students, are ready for schoolwork. We know and recognize this has been really difficult and challenging in so many ways. Our reopening plans are designed to reduce those challenges going forward. And I share everyone's frustration and what we've experienced up until now from a failure, complete absence of national leadership, and now with a new president and administration that is taking the responsibility of moving with a broad-based national plan of attacking the pandemic. That is certainly refreshing from a local level. I can't emphasize that enough. That leadership is crucial. And with his most recent announcements today as well, in terms of increasing the amount of vaccinations and vaccine dosages, but also to what's happening at different states and really the abdication of any type of responsibility to develop plans to respond to COVID or how we open up schools. So we've had put and tried to put the most well-informed plan and make policy decisions that has the highest levels of health and safety that allows us to, one, keep our teachers, staff, students, families, and communities safe, but allows us to carve a path to the pandemic and not having to react to any particular one case or something in isolation. And so having to go back and forth on whether schools are open or not. And we are confident in our plan, and we are progressing with our plan to maintain, again, the highest safety standards to keep all the students and teachers and school staff who support them safe. The protocols that we've established to catch the presence of the virus in our classrooms, isolate and control it before the spread of the virus forces the schools to close again. And they're really designed to provide a safe and sustainable environment, as I mentioned, that is most conducive to learning. And that's what we mean, as I mentioned before, and I want to restate, by sustainable opening, because as difficult as this is for so many of you and so many families, we don't want to add to the trauma of uncertainty to students and families with the constant seesawing of opening and closing, just as we don't want to see our school community harmed or anybody else in the community harmed by the virus. For those of you who are connected to someone you know or care or love in a way that you suffered a loss, our heart goes out to you and your families. But we do want to thank you and for doing all you're doing to help us as a community respond to COVID. And we do want to state we recognize that we are aware and also aware of the hardships it's placed upon so many of you. So we thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for your resiliency and determination. And we will continue to dedicate every public resource we have towards supporting you and your children, your families through these difficult times. Next slide, please. Again, safety remains a top priority for reopening schools in a phased manner, and our city and school staff are using this time to finalize extra safeguards to minimize the risk to students, families, and staff. The evolving science on transmission by aerosol and experiences of other school districts have shown the worth of our cautious and calculated approach. And tonight, we'll be providing the most recent updates on mitigation efforts, system-wide COVID testing, and the estimated timetable for phased in-person learning. Next slide, please. Right now, I wanted to just provide some context. This is where things stand in Massachusetts in terms of COVID-19 cases, which, as you can see, peaked in late December and early January. There's still an unknown about what impact the variant or variants of COVID-19 will have, and that is being closely monitored. It is now, as you can see, declining with hospitalizations across the state, in testing and deaths starting to trend downward. The table below that is just a snapshot of Somerville's COVID-19 transmission, and we've included the data from our last town hall, which was on October 29th, to show how the virus has changed and progressed over the past several months. Next slide, please. As always, if you have seen us present this, this is a reminder that our approach has considered all the factors that might impact our ability to safely move into phases of reopening. There are factors, as you know, external to the school, such as community transmission or new guidance from the CDC, or the availability of human and material resources. And then there are those internal factors over which we do have more control. So these are the building ventilation, COVID-19 surveillance testing, and maintaining classroom bubbles. And really, as we have mentioned before, we are looking at the full constellation of all these factors and moving as quickly as we possibly can on factors over which we have control. There is absolutely no question that this has taken much longer than any of us wanted it to take. But really, given the unpredictability and still evolving nature of the virus, we are confident that this is still the right approach for our community. So I want to thank you and appreciate the tremendous sacrifices that everyone in our community has made over the past more than 10 months. It's unbelievable it's been that long, and I assure you that we are working really as hard as we can to get through this, but to do so without compromising the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our families, and the community at large. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kristen Stelgis. We'll go next slide, and she'll begin presenting from the perspective of the School Opening Advisory Group. Kristen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here this evening. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to speak about the School Opening Advisory Group to explain what it does and how it works and why. So the advisory group is really focused on making recommendations based on public health data and the latest scientific research. This is a group that is making recommendations to the mayor and the superintendent about opening schools, specifically based on this focus on the data and the research. So this group, it meets weekly. As of today, it has 4 meetings. It has made one recommendation, and that is recommending that the schools move forward with the plan to bring back students in phase 1 and phase 2 in February, and you'll hear more about that later in the presentation. Because this group is so specifically focused on looking at the public health data and the latest scientific research, it's made up of individuals with specific expertise or knowledge of various aspects of the school reopening safety plans. And when they're looking at public health data, it's really important to us that we be transparent about what data they are looking at and that it be available to the community as well. So as of today, the SPS COVID dashboard, which the link is here, has been expanded, and Dr. Curley has put the link in the chat. And so you can see the data that they're looking at. Because we don't have students back yet for in-person learning, the data that's available there now is on community transmission, but you'll see at the end of the dashboard, the list of all the indicators that we'll be looking at and being making publicly available as soon as we have that data and have validated the indicators. The members of the group come from 4 different bodies. So one group is Somerville Public Schools. And so we have Dr. Curley as Chief of Staff, the East Somerville Community School Principal, to help inform the group about operations across the school, and Kenya Avant, the Data Coordinator. Dr. Sarah Phillips serves from the school committee. And then we have members of the Incident Command System who are experts in public health and in contact tracing and testing, as well as community experts who joined the panel after a call out to the community for experts who could help inform this group. We have Gabrielle Jacquet, who is an emergency physician with expertise in viral outbreaks, and Danielle Lin Tang, who's an environmental engineer and infectious disease expert. And they are bringing into the group their connections and what they're learning from collaborations with World Health Organizations, research that they're reading, and connections with local hospitals, so that we can, in this particular lens of looking at opening, the data and what we're learning from the research. There are 2 non-deliberating members of the group. I am one of them as the planning chief. I serve as the group's facilitator, and my colleague in the planning section, Brianna Noonan, is our situation lead. She is the person that has created the city and the school COVID dashboard, and she's the person who provides the data briefing for each of the meetings of the group. So how is the group making decisions? So this group is making a recommendation to the mayor and superintendent, again, based on public health data and the latest evidence and research about opening schools and closing individual schools once we get there if needed for the full district. Because it is important if there's any sign of transmission within the schools that those classrooms or cohorts be moved to remote learning as soon as possible. Those decisions will not be made by the opening advisory group. Those decisions will be made by school and city staff in real time based on data that's coming out of the testing program. So factors that the school opening advisory group will be considering and making the recommendation include the data that's available in the dashboard. There are no specific thresholds set for any of these indicators so that we can look at the data, how it's interacting dynamically. We also know that based on the strength of the testing program and the other protocols in place, that the best data about our community is going to be coming from the testing program data. And so we'll be relying on that very heavily in the discussions in the group once we have students back and in-person learning. And the group is also paying very close attention to the latest research and guidance from WHO and the CDC. And as I mentioned, this group is just but one piece. It's very specifically focused on the public health data and research. So I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Curley, who's going to be talking about the other groups and bodies that are informing decision-making around school reopening.
Thanks, Kristen. So, the reopening process has been a complicated but coordinated effort between our staff, our schools, districts, city, community partners. There's people I'm sure watching that have volunteered their time. Lots of scientific and medical experts in the community and throughout the greater Boston area have all lent their expertise to us. One of the things we'll talk about in more detail is a close collaboration between the district, Health and Human Services, and the city to collaborate on COVID testing and contact tracing efforts for any positive cases within the SPS community. Since December, we've been COVID testing essential building-based staff, including food service, after-school staff, teachers who are teaching outside, and we're expanding that program quite rapidly thanks to support from HHS and the rec department. So there's been a lot of input within and support from the city in building this reopening plan. We also are sharing all of our proposals and protocols with staff and with our bargaining units. We have agreement on shared reopening with nearly all of the different bargaining units in our system. We're in the final stretch, hopefully, of negotiation with the Somerville Teachers Union. And we're regularly trying to share information across these groups, including with school-based reopening committees that are comprised of teachers, paras, parents, and counselors. All of this, we're taking into account kind of the evolving science of COVID with support from medical and scientific experts, some of whom serve on committees, as Kristen mentioned, some of whom have come and talked to us in public town halls. So all of that we're trying to synthesize and put together in a coordinated effort. I'll turn it over now to my colleague, friend, and often frequent evening presenter, Rich Race, to talk a little bit about the buildings.
Thank you, Dr. Curley. So I've got a couple of slides to go through. Susanna, you can go to the next one. For anyone who's been paying attention here, this will be a little bit of a review, but it's worth going over what our scope of work is for the building improvements. And they do fall into a couple of different categories that are good to keep in mind as we progress the work and look to open the buildings. For minimum threshold for occupancy to open the buildings, we need to upgrade the filtration efficiency, increase from MERV 8 to MERV 13 to filter out the virus from the air, and increase the ventilation rates to the rooms. This is done through what we call retro commissioning all the air handling equipment, essentially going through piece by piece on all of the air handling equipment and making sure that it not only handles the additional pressures that those higher rated filters create, but is also exchanging the air as they were originally designed to do so. We're also installing carbon dioxide monitors throughout the buildings. This is being done so that we can have an ongoing quality control to make sure that that air exchange is happening. It is important, however, to know that this really only measures that the success of the air exchange and not the overall quality of the air, because it doesn't measure the filtration. There's additional work that we will allow to continue to happen after we've occupied the buildings, and that is installing inline UV irradiation to disinfect the air, as well as inline humidification, because viral transmission rates are higher when it's very humid or very dry, and if we keep it in the comfortable range, transmission rates are lower. This approach, in addition to being consistent with the ASHRAE guidelines, is also consistent with the Harvard School of Public Health for full-time in-person education. Again, the thresholds being the filtration and the ventilation, and the additional work of disinfection and humidification goes above and beyond, and is really what we want to do to protect our teachers and students. And this is geared around, full-time in-person education, where the teachers and students are there for extended periods of time and high numbers. It should be noted that shorter duration, lower density meetings and use of some spaces have been approved on a case-by-case basis, which is why some assessments and some after-school programs have started utilizing indoor spaces on a limited basis as approved by the group. We've been progressing the work very quickly and efficiently. All of the air filters have been delivered and installed in Group 1 and 2 buildings, are in process for the Group 3 buildings. The retro commissioning is essentially at a stopping point for the Group 1, Group 2, JFK buildings. We're nearly done in the Winter Hill, and we'll be moving on to the Healy either tomorrow or Thursday. This work, again, one of the reasons why we wanted to do it was make sure that every piece of equipment was operating as it was originally designed and is moving air properly. And we have found that there are a few deficiencies there. So we have brought in our maintenance contractor, the on-call contractor that's responsible for that. As soon as these deficiencies came to our attention, we started working from the top right on down. The mayor got on the phone, made calls, we mobilized everyone. We have a meeting with that contractor tomorrow to go over these details and initiate that work, that additional work in the schools, so that then this contractor can finish up all that retro commissioning and balancing. We're also working through some details with the engineer on the operations of the East, which is a complicated system of air handling. The portable units, there are some locations in some of the buildings where the centralized air handlers wouldn't get us up to exactly where we wanted to be. So we have mobilized portable filtration and humidification units. Those are all being put in place. The CO2 monitors are in process, as well as the wellness rooms and the nurse station exhaust. We want to completely separate those rooms from the rest of the system, knowing that essentially 6 students go there, so there's a higher prevalence of the virus in those rooms. We want to exhaust that to the outside. That's heavier construction, and that's underway. Before we talk about the schedule, it is important to understand that there are a lot of risk factors that go into work like this. Anytime you do construction and estimate how long it's going to take to do that, there are a number of factors that are outside of your control that can impact that schedule. Supply chain and different parts of the supply chain can impact different projects at different times differently. When we began this project, there was a high demand for filters, and we were getting quotes that they wouldn't be delivered to Somerville for 8 to 12 weeks. When that happened, we sprung into action. Again, calls from the mayor on down, and we cut that lead time to mere days to not impact the schedule. Labor force can impact. If we have tradespeople that contract COVID-19, obviously we'll have a labor force issue. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet, but it may still. Even just the work involved, the estimates could be off. There might, because of the speed with which we've implemented these projects, there might be things that have missed that we have to add. That will impact the schedule. Unforeseen conditions, as I say, we weren't anticipating seeing some of these problems that need to be addressed with the air handlers. But we encounter them, we mitigate it. We don't stand back and say, oh, well, we won't have this done for a couple of months. We're doing everything we can to shorten this. Now, that said, these risks do accumulate and they are out there. One of the things we want to do is strive to get these buildings open as quickly as possible. And we want to give the Somerville Public School system an understanding of what the fastest is that we could do it, but also communicate how these different risks can impact the schedule. So as we move to the next slide, which is a little bit dense to read, this is the sort of readout that we are giving SPS. The red are days that we know are work days. Just given the base scope, given what we need to do to progress the work, those are going to be work days. The orange, as we encounter the risk, we know that this is going to add some work. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take us to do that work. We're working through that right now, mitigating to the extent possible, but we'll give SPS that sort of range of days that are likely to impact the schedule in the orange. There's other items that we haven't encountered yet that could happen. And given how much work we're doing in each one of the buildings, it's a little bit different for each building. But we try to get our heads around knowing what we know about work like this, what could possibly go wrong and what could impact additional work, which leads us to the dark green, which are the days that we can confidently say, or at least with some degree of confidence, we'll be done with the work by then. Again, we are not living in a world where risk is zero. Something else could go catastrophically wrong and impact those dates, but those are the reasonable dates. And so we sort of bracket the optimistic and pessimistic turnover dates. And we are constantly updating this schedule at least once a week, if not 2 or 3 times a week, and communicating that with Superintendent Skipper, Dr. Curley, and their whole team so that they can strategize around how to best utilize the real estate that is afforded to them in each one of these buildings. Now, obviously, the Brown School is not on this list. Most of our schools are, with the exception of the Brown and the Edgerly, and the old high school, which is closed anyway, all of these schools already have centralized air handling systems that we can modify. The Brown does not. There was no way, there was never any way that we could bring the Brown up to this pandemic standard within the year. Doesn't mean we're abandoning the Brown, absolutely not. It just means that it requires a very different work plan. And that work is progressing on a separate track. Because of the way that work is progressing, we don't have answers for that yet for next year or for the long term. We are working to get some answers on that, and we'll be communicating to the Brown School community what the implications are, particularly as we're looking for kindergarten and next year enrollment. It's also important to look at this overall list of real estate, acknowledging that fact and having the high school mods, the temporary classrooms that were already on site, available to us. We extended that lease so that we could take advantage of that real estate so that on balance, if in the Brown we're losing 12 classrooms, the mods afford us 16 classrooms. On balance, we have enough to accommodate in the short term. So that becomes part of the strategy. So given this range and constant communication, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Skipper on how they interpret all of this and devise a plan for occupancy.
Thank you, Mr. H. And thank you to Rich for all of his work on trying to put a lot of moving pieces into a plan. What's helpful about that graphic is that it gives us sort of a range. And as you look, March is really going to be a really active month for classrooms and schools kind of coming online. What we're going to attempt to do in different parts of the presentation tonight is to give you the information we can give you. I do think we're going into a February where each week it'll be a lot like when we first started, which is each week you'll be getting updates and there'll be significant parts to those updates. So tonight is the beginning of that. It won't answer all the questions, but certainly it's the idea is to show that we're making that progression, and again looking to March as a a time that we'll be able to start getting some students back in for in-person. So I'd like to start with, in the next slide, the priority populations. And to just remind everyone, this has not really changed for us. This is identifying populations, particularly our special education, English language learners who are having a great deal of difficulty actually accessing the remote learning. And this would also include our youngest learners, such as our pre-K and K. So, in this chart, what we're really doing is re-emphasizing the two phases, 2A and B, which is our special education and our Ls. Our CT seniors are in there, given that they're seniors, they're going on. They have some, the CT spaces at the high school, and the high school is available for us to use, beautiful spaces, and it'll be an opportunity for them to be able to put into practice for the duration that they have some of the skills that they've learned relative to their trades and vocations. And then of course we start into like the 3 phases, which is pre-K and K, and then going up to grades 1 to 3 and so forth. We've listed also on the left-hand side, noting that phase 2A and 2B, which is our special needs high level and our Ls, that those are 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That will stay consistent. Wednesday is an all remote when there will be cleaning that'll be done in the buildings. And then next wave full circle, which has space, it's moving from the Edgerly to the high school as planned. They would be in a hybrid mode, as would RCT seniors, some of our Somerville high school students that would need some redirect work, who are having trouble being able to access and need coursework for graduation or as juniors. And then certainly our pre-K and Ks, those would all come back in hybrid. And the hybrid, as we'll remind, is the 2 days where you're in person with the 3 days where you're doing components remote. In terms of the building changes, we've been trying as best we can to figure out how to use what we do have. So we were able to brainstorm with the city how to get in and use some of the spaces now that some of the work around filtration has been done and so forth, keeping the population to a low density, but using spaces so that that first group of high priority special needs students who are not able to access at all would be able to do that. Many of these teachers that are servicing our students that fall in this level have been using the outside. So in the fall, they were using the tents. And then certainly even in the winter, they've been setting up and using tables outside. So we've been able to work with the city to identify locations in several schools where the programs are located to be able to use, again, very low density, few students and the staff, and have those students and staff folded into the testing. Director Trevisoni has been a great advocate of this and has helped with a lot of the operations. So I'm going to actually ask her to just do a quick 2-minute on this, because I do think it's important to note that we are beginning to be able to get services to our highest needs. Christine?
Sure, thank you, Mary. So again, we've been meeting with, many staff have been meeting with students outside, and it's time to bring them in. We've been able to work with the city. We're hoping to work with students in about 2-hour blocks. This is a voluntary program. So this is teachers in these highest needs programs who have opted in, and staff who have opted in to come into the building to work with staff. What's important that's different is that we'll be doing baseline testing and weekly COVID-19 testing on any students who will be participating in this group. And there's also a mask mandate that for all staff and students who are participating in this, which would move into when we go into person fully. And we'll be calling and reaching out to all families tomorrow that are involved in this. They've already been speaking to the teachers. Again, it's about capacity. So it's been deemed safe to bring small, limited groups of students into the building And we're currently looking at about approximately 18 of our highest self-contained classrooms. And I'm happy to announce that as of this afternoon, 11 of those classrooms have chosen to participate in this voluntary program to work with staff. So again, staff will identify who feels comfortable returning. They'll identify the students, the days and times for these sessions, and reach out to families.
Great. Thank you, Director Trevisoni. So this next slide hopefully will help parents to get a sense of what we're thinking in terms of the building of return. We heard loud and clear that for disruption purposes, families really wanted students to be able to go to the buildings that they come from, their home buildings, transportation issues, familiarity issues, things like that. It also, for us, was a priority because the logistics of moving entire programs and or schools is a large undertaking. So the more we've been able to collapse this, I think the better for all. So, and you'll be able to find this afterwards on our website, but to give you a sense, the Argenziano will, for all intents purposes, be the Argenziano. So if you're a student there now in pre-K to 8, if you're an SEI 1 or 2 student in any of the lower grades, you will be returning to Argenziano. Additionally, because the Healy will not be able to come up for quite some time, the L learners who we identify as SEI 1s and 2s from grades K to 4, they will be placed as a program over at the Argenziano. This will actually allow all the SEI 1s and 2s from K to 8 to be together as support. And so that is the one program move from the Healy that will need to happen. The Capuano will, for all intents purposes, be the Capuano. The AIM pre-K and K will be there. The ECIP classes will be there. And the pre-K and K SMILE classes and kindergarten classes will be there. At East Somerville, that will too be East Somerville, K to 8, the UNITAS program, and the special education multi-graded, which serves grades 5 to 8. So that will all be at the East. In the high school mods, as Mr. Raish indicated for the Brown School, we also heard it was important for the school to stay together. And so we are fortunate enough in the mods to be able to have a place that will allow all of the classrooms and the staff to come together in the mods. And so that will be a whole school move from the Brown over to the mods. The Kennedy is the one that we are still looking at. Mr. Raish's chart it has a large band of a little bit of unknown there. And so right now what we're sort of safely saying is that the SEEK program and the pre-K to 8 for Kennedy would go to the Kennedy. What that leaves are the life skill classes that are at the Kennedy. We had already slated the lower life skills, the younger students, the K to 3, to go to the high school because they can't access or do it through remote. What's at question is whether we move the other life skills class over. So that will be a decision that once we get a little bit more information will be made. Somerville High will be very heavily programmed. To start with special education, most of all of Winter Hill in some way, shape, or form will be at Somerville High. In the case of special education, you will have the AIM program for our students with autism, and that runs grade 1 to 8. That will be located at the high school. The life skills minimum lower for the Kennedy, but we're also thinking that it actually may be the K to 8 strand. The SKIP medically fragile at the Kennedy will be at the high school. The multi-graded Healy, which again, because of the grades, it's serving the younger grades. And then as the older grades come back, they would go to the high school as well. Somerville High School itself has resource room and ASD learning labs. Those would both be situated there. Life skills at the high school 9 to 12 would be there. The transition class from the high school would be there, and SHIP, our medically fragile high school students, would be at the high school. So a lot of the classrooms at the high school will be dedicated to supporting the special education highest needs programming. Additionally, for our English language learner students, the Winter Hill SEI, which runs grades 5 to 8, will need to be located at the high school. We will be creating multilingual learning centers, and these centers will be for students who may not be in an SEI class. They may be levels 3 and 4, but they need some additional supports in terms of access. as well as Somerville High newcomers ESL 1s. General education programming, Winter Hill Pre-K to 8 and Healy Pre-K to 3. We still have hope that the Healy will come on potentially after April break. That may mean, or before, that may mean that we can bring additional grades back to the Healy. But as it stands right now, we're counting on Pre-K to 3 staying at the high school with the Healy. Next Wave Full Circle, which was always slated to occupy its new location at the high school, would still plan to do so. And Somerville High CTE juniors and seniors redirect learning labs, which would be for students, again, looking at seniors, juniors to start who need particular courses and are struggling to graduate, and then kind of working down into all the way to the 9th grade. That would be done through a learning lab model. The Somerville High or the Somerville Child Care Center would be located there. And then each of the houses is looking right now at also having some additional learning lab opportunities for students who want some quiet space to be able to come and use. West Somerville would be just West Somerville, Pre-K to 8. And then again, little notation at the bottom, the Healy, again, what we do know is up till 3rd grade, Healy will be at the high school. 4th grade up, we are going to wait to see if we can get some good news that the Healy building piece will come on sooner. The Winter Hill will remain for the year, no question, out of the Winter Hill and at the high school. So this chart is helpful, I hope, to parents and to staff so that they know this is where my child's going to be going. In addition to this, we will be doing an amazing amount of outreach to families, to parents, as we'll be starting to survey and ask questions around, is the intent to come back? Is the intent to stay remote? But this will at least, try to minimize the transportation issues. In the case of special ed and ELL, which is the bulk of the students going to the high school, we will be providing the normal special education and ELL transportation. Next, please. In terms of just what's going to happen in the remainder of January, the things we've been working on and into February, there's quite a bit. So as you know, receiving updates, we have worked through negotiations. We've worked through agreements with all of our unions. With SEU, we are still in active negotiations around the safety and reopening, as well as around some of the educational components of the reopening plan. And so we are staying at it. We are oftentimes multiple times a week meeting, knowing and believing fully that everybody wants our students back and staff want to be back, and we want to do everything we can to ensure that staff feel safe in doing so. We will continue to work with DPW. That has been a great partner. We've already begun moving a great deal of furniture, specialized items, some small, some large, our PPE, teacher materials. We'll be providing classroom time for the teachers that are moving physical buildings. They will need several days to be able to pack up their classroom, identify what's going where, and then get to the new location and then be able to unpack all of that. Additionally, there will be some teachers who might, in the context of not having been back into their classroom, need to set their classroom up. So we will be providing the opportunity through time and sub coverage for teachers to be able to do that. We will be working with our unions and staff to look at accommodations, leave requests, remote working assignments. That will be a big piece of as we are working to survey families to determine who is thinking to come back, who would like to continue to stay remote. That will start to form a picture of what we need for teachers in terms of remote assignments versus in person. And so we will be actively over the next several weeks collecting that data again, as we had initially for groups 1 and 2, and trying to make the matches of that, again, working with union partners. We will be providing dates for the baseline testing for all students and staff. This is a critical piece to ensure that they receive a baseline, they get used to the test, because they will then be doing it on a weekly basis and staff on a bi-weekly basis from that point on. Next slide, please. As you know, we've been trying to also hear the community and recognize that whatever we can put in place to help support while schools are remote, we are trying to do. So community schools has really stepped up and done an amazing job and continues to do an amazing job in expanding for those needs. We will again be revisiting with rec for the spring, and the tents that we purchased. Once the DPW deems that it's safe enough to put up, we will have those back up again. Not only the ones we purchased, but the ones rec purchased and the ones CS has. So to expand our outdoor menu of being able to service students in all different kinds of programs. I am going to ask Dr. Curley and Rosanna to just talk briefly about the indoor and outdoor after school pilot that is now evolving into a more expanded plan.
Good evening, everyone. So community schools has been able to continue providing out of school time programming and opportunities for students to have some enrichment and social time outdoors since July. And most recently, we've moved inside. It has been deemed safe to be indoors, but we still try to be outside as much as possible. Most recently, we started with the Genziano School and Capuano, and we're moving right along with other schools opening this week and the following week. So the spaces we use are large spaces such as cafeterias. Students and staff are still required to follow all health and safety protocols that we've been doing since July and continue to monitor and work on improving those protocols. Students and teachers have been continued to be tested. So we started with baseline testing for all students to participate indoors, and teachers as well have been testing weekly, and it's gone fairly well. It's been great to have teachers be able to test right along with students, make them feel comfortable. And since July, we haven't had any known transmission through the program, and teachers have been amazing and supportive in working with the pilot. So we'll, as we look at expansion, we'll continue to grow with most recently this week, Winter Hill, following weeks, Healy and Kennedy. We'll plan to grow schools as we set up testing in parallel. We'll work with like Mary said, we'll work with DPW to get the tents back up in March, because the plan is to be outdoors as much as possible. And then we're continuing to explore the possibility of expanding programming to our younger students for pre-KK, but it will depend on the in-person hybrid learning. So the next slide this is a snapshot of the schools that have reopened to offer limited indoor programming and the start dates and students. As you can see, it is small groups of students. And we're moving right along to try to open up all the schools before the February vacation program. And then we hope to have Brown up and running as well, and find a place for them to be. So all the programs will be indoors.
Thank you, Rosanna. So in terms of, what school will look like, and there'll be a lot more of this information that's going to be coming weekly to you. But to just give you a sense, I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Maza to just kind of give a brief reminder about our LMS, but also around the hybrid.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper. So as we know, one of the pieces with the remote learning, we have the LMS, and this slide gives you the student enrollment by grade. We have 31 total students in K-8, and that's the Florida virtual school. And we do not have any grades 9 through 12 students, which would have been Edgenuity, which is a program that we already have at the high school. 90% of our enrolled students are currently passing with an average of 80% or above, while 10% are currently at risk with an average below 80%. And students that are at risk receive more frequent monitoring and feedback. Susanna, next slide, please. So the hybrid learning model, again, 2 cohorts, cohort A and cohort B. We have about 10 to 12 students for each, which allows students to be physically in the building and to facilitate that 6 foot of distance that we are looking for in terms of safety. It'll be a 2-day in-person and 3-day remote schedule. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesdays will be all remote for students. And there will be both synchronous and asynchronous learning on Wednesdays as well. Next slide, please. An important piece here to remember that students whose families choose to remain remote, you have the choice when we do go back to in-person to stay remote. You will continue to be taught by a subgroup of SPS teachers, grade and content appropriate. And the process for identifying this remote-only staff will be worked on collaboratively with the SEU. We're in talks with them as we speak. And again, we'll try to keep the majority of students with their teacher, but unfortunately, there will be cases for which that will not work. For example, a teacher takes a leave and students request in person, or a student remains remote while a teacher teaches in person. So we will look at that and we will do our best to make sure that students have their current teachers. And again, most high school students will remain remote with a few exceptions, our CTE seniors and juniors, and students with high special needs, and students who are English learners at levels 1 and 2.
And so, you know, as students are going into school, it will look really different. School principals will be sending out information regarding student drop-off and pickup, a reminder about daily checks. In this, you know, in this case, sanitation stations have all been installed. You know, we're looking to develop videos and have been working on that to help students and families get a sense, age appropriate, of what it'll be like to return to the buildings. And we'll be sharing those with families over the next several weeks. Again, all as ways to help with transition to get back in person. Again, in terms of the directional signage, the floors have signage, the walls have signage. We will also be ensuring the 6-foot distance, and that includes directional of staircases. I mean, really all the thoughts of how the flow of the buildings will be. The hand washing and sanitation stations have been set up throughout the school buildings. Additional portable sinks have been brought into some locations. There'll be lots of opportunities for the students and the staff to take short mask breaks, identifying areas that are well ventilated, and also obviously the outside. You know, as Superintendent Mazda mentioned about the cohorts A and B, you know, we'll also be working with community schools around this, having heard the desire to have students attend community schools on the same days that they're in person. There'll be some nuances, the specialist classes, some counseling classes, some of the English language and the special ed supports will continue to be online. Again, thinking of cohorting and safety where that can't happen and there's adults that are crossing across too many of the groups, we will keep remote. We will be requiring the weekly COVID testing for students and staff. That's a critical part of our safety plan. And over the next few weeks, as the building work gets completed, we're going in while the building is still actively being done. And as we're continuing to finalize negotiations, we'll be sending out more specific details on a weekly basis, as well as training opportunities for students and staff and parents. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Director Kress to talk a bit about the COVID testing plan.
Thank you, Superintendent. I appreciate the time to be here tonight, and hello to all of our parents, and thank you for all of the work that you are doing during this pandemic. I was talking with some of my staff earlier today and realizing that we have been working on this for almost a year now, so it is taxing. I completely understand. I think we've been through a lot of the information that I'm going to cover tonight, so I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly tonight so that we can have some time for questions and answers at the end. Next slide. As you see, one of the things that's most important for us that we can do is take a couple of minutes each morning to stop and do a daily self-assessment for our symptoms. We're asking parents to consider doing this at home so that we can keep the virus out of our school. This form that we have in front of you is just a quick checklist that we're asking parents to do on a daily basis for your students, but this is something we all should be doing prior to leaving our homes, because we do want to make sure that if you're having any of these symptoms, please stay home so that we can slow the spread of this virus. Please note that this is also in multiple languages, so you can see how that does fit within there. Next slide. While we're hoping that students who are not feeling well will stay home, but we understand that sometimes young ones do come to school and they start to feel sick while they're at school. So we need your partnership as parents and guardians to ensure that they get home safely to rest and do that in a safe and quick manner. So we have set protocols, and we put a plan in place for when a student does become ill at school. First of all, the student's going to be with an illness is going to be sent to the school nurse's office. And there they're going to be assessed for all of their symptoms and determine if the student can stay or if they need to be sent home. If they're showing signs for COVID-19, the school nurse obviously will be calling you to let you know what the details are about this. Now, if the student will need to be picked up, they should be picked up within 30 minutes of the call. That will help keep the virus out of our schools and make sure that we can remain safe for the rest of the students in there. Once you arrive to pick up your student, the nurses will give you an update on the student's progress, where they're at, and provide some guidance. And that may include contacting your primary care physician to give them additional information and to seek additional medical treatments. And it may also include getting the students tested outside of the regular protocols that we have in place. Next slide. So when we look at this first, I want to say thank you to all of you parents and the students who went and followed the state's immunization requirements of getting the flu vaccine. You have to remember that we want to keep those records updated. So please turn in your students' health vaccine records as soon as you're able to the student's school nurse. We know that getting the seasonal flu vaccine is an important part of our overall COVID mitigation strategies in the schools and in our community. Keeping staff and students healthy not only will help reduce the overwhelming that may happen for our school nurses and our healthcare system with the traditional flu cases, it will allow us to focus on COVID-19 and reduce the number of students and staff we may have to send home with symptoms, whether they are the flu and or COVID-19. Now, although the state has dropped the flu vaccine requirement, we strongly recommend and encourage that all students and staff get the flu vaccine and make sure that they take this as an added measure. We are also, as we've discussed in the past, we are also implementing our routine COVID-19 testing. Now that will include baseline and routine testing, and the protocols that we've adopted in the schools will focus on as we reopen the buildings and the plans to provide the students, the staff, and close contacts access to testing for COVID-19 on a routine basis and when needed. We have successfully started to pilot these programs already in our schools. Next slide. We already know that there are a lot of benefits to the routine testing. It's going to help us identify individuals who are asymptomatic and also who are pre-symptomatic. We're able to rule out for those people who may have some symptoms, but it's not a COVID-19, and they're able to return to school at an easier and faster term. We also know that the baseline and the frequency of the testing will help evaluate the effectiveness of all the other protocols that we have put in place. Next slide. So one of the things that I think a lot of people are unsure of or kind of wondering about is what's the progression of COVID-19? We find that these kind of graphics are a little helpful for you to understand it and make it a little bit more simple. When we look at this information, we know that there's an exposure point. There's a short period of incubation period where somebody may not have any of the symptoms, but eventually will becoming symptomatic. Not all people will have symptoms, however, and then eventually it becomes into recovery. We usually look at that incubation period time before they have symptoms between 4 and 5 days. Next slide. And then when we look at the infectious period, it usually begins a few days before the symptoms are starting to appear. So if you look at this and you look at the timeline on here, you'll see where the viral load really does take a very sharp increase in how much virus is inside of the system fairly quickly. Once the virus is there, that will take about 4 days. Then we're starting to see the infectious period when somebody actually can shed the virus and pass it on to others. And then they may or may not have symptoms. And it quickly then also, as you see in the graphic here, we start to lose that viral load, which slowly leads us to no longer being infectious. Next slide. So when we look at this, we understand why the screening test can help detect the virus even before we're starting to see some of the symptoms. And that's why the tests that we are performing are going to be the PCR test during our routine screening, and a critical way to help keep the virus outside of our school systems themselves. And again, this is to identify the students and staff who may be pre-symptomatic and be able to get them out of the schools and slow the spread of the virus. Next slide. As you can see, we have already been, and we've already talked about, we've already been doing the screening testing here in the Somerville Public Schools. We started that back on December 9th, and we will be extending this to 4 different locations currently, and it will continue to grow, as Rosanna talked a little bit about earlier. We are doing our testing in a variety of locations, in the locations where the students are actually in the schools, so that we make it convenient for all of you. So far, we have had 448 individuals who've tested. About 80 of those are students, and we've administered over 1,700 tests themselves. We've had 16 positive cases during this process, which gives us a test positivity rate of less than 1% at 0.9%. Next slide. So one of the reasons that we also want to talk about some of this information is really look at the baseline testing. And baseline testing is really important. And the reason that we do this is we want that to happen before any student or there's a return of any person to in-person activities. And that's for staff and students. And we're asking each of them to receive a baseline COVID-19 test. The baselines have already been performed on at several locations across our community. And we are also doing some students and staff ongoing at a variety of our community schools and the after-school programming. The baseline tests are really effective because what it will do is it will help identify individuals and can be identified before they even begin the in-person learning. That's why we start with the baseline testing. Once in the baseline testing, then they will be put into the regular programming and into the regular testing protocols that we have in place. Next slide, very quickly, as a reminder, that the tests that we do are the anterior nasal swab, which is just a light cotton swab that goes up into the nose, not very far, and it gently swabbed around the side of the nose. It takes about 5 seconds in each nostril, and then it is placed into a test tube. Students are going to be able to self-administer this, and what the state is now stating is that even students as young as the 2nd grade may be able to do their own swabbing. We've been in some of the schools already, and as I said, we're working with Cataldo Ambulance, who are helping us with doing some of the swabbing and have a lot of expertise with this. And I think many of the parents who've been part of this have been very happy about the process that we've gone through. We've even been able to train some of the young ones on how to do the swabbing themselves. And what's interesting is many of them would rather do it themselves because they think that they are grown-ups now. And it's always nice to see that with our young ones. I want to remind everybody that this testing is free. This is not there's no charge for any of this. This testing is free. Once we move forward, we are going to be part of the pool testing, which you may have seen some information on the state and on the media that's been going around, where schools are going to be doing pool testing. We have been piloting and looking to do some of this stuff for many months now with Tufts University, and we're going to be implementing that shortly. As a reminder, this is just as sensitive as just an individual test. It's efficient, it's reliable, and it's also saving us some monies because we are able to pool a variety of people into one test and clear multiple people at one time. As we've talked about in the past, next slide, if you do a pool test, one of the things that we are going to remind everybody is that we will not be communicating the results. The only time the results that would be communicated is if there is a positive within the pool test, because that entire pool would test positive. Next slide. Within that, again, if you have a pool and one of those individuals tests positive, what we will do is we will call you back and your student, and we will retest everybody within that pool. That will happen with two different tests. One, we are working with the state to also do a rapid test, so we'll be able to eliminate many of the people who are negative within that pool and hopefully be able to start to identify who the individual was that was positive within that pool. We will also follow that up with a PCR test because we know that those are much more sensitive, and we're able to catch those who are pre-symptomatic as well moving forward. Once these tests are done, and those are individual PCR tests, we will report those results out individually to the people who take those tests. Next slide. One of the questions that we also keep hearing about is we hear a lot about this thing called a close contact. A close contact, as I want to remind everybody, is somebody who's within 6 feet of an individual who has tested positive. So how are we going to deal with and how are we looking at quarantine guidance for close contacts? Because that's a big question for individuals. So when we look at that, if somebody decides and looks at that, do you get a PCR test within 5 or 7 days after your last exposure? If the answer is yes, then what will happen is you go and you have that test. If that test is negative, you'll remain quarantined for a total of 7 days and you'll be able to return to school on day 8. If you test positive, you would obviously fall under and continue to go through the same protocols that we would do for a positive individual because you have tested positive for COVID-19. If you choose to not go and have a test done, we are going to ask that you are going to go and you're going to quarantine for 10 days and you're able to return on day 11 and continue to monitor for symptoms for up to day 14. Any cases that we look at this, we always want to make sure that you monitor yourself for the full 14-day period of quarantine, which was what we first discussed way back last year when we were talking about quarantine and isolation. Now, if you're an individual and you're a close contact and you have symptoms, we want to remind you that you should remain quarantined for the full 14 days and you should be tested. Now, the protocols that we have in place, if you're a Somerville Public Schools connection, we will help get you connected to one of those tests as well. So we want to make sure that that is an opportunity and we want to eliminate any barriers for somebody to get that testing. If you come back and you decide to wait and not have symptoms, but you test negative, we still encourage you to continue to follow the quarantine for the full 14 days, even with that negative test, so that we can make sure that we don't reintroduce or introduce the COVID-19 into the system itself. Next slide. I guess I'm going to hand it back over to the mayor and superintendent for questions.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you everyone for trying to absorb a very dense presentation. This presentation will put the information, a chat function will be posted in the city's virtual town hall section of the website. Again, your questions should come through the Q&A function or the comment section on YouTube Live. We have many questions here, and thank you for that. I'll do my best to capture questions from as many different people as possible and summarize some of the very similar questions. So here we go. I'm going to give it a shot. And again, we ask you to follow up with us and we'll try to follow up with you if we don't get to all the questions. There are several questions from various folks I believe, Elizabeth Caffrey, Anna Portnoy. I scanned through this and others. I apologize. I can't remember all the names regarding the status of union negotiations. What happens if we can't come to agreement? So next steps then. So I guess I'll defer the flavor of that question and the different parts to Chairman Andre Green.
Thank you. So, I want to say that we continue to work with SCU. As the Mayor pointed out, we have reached agreements with the other bargaining units. We continue to meet weekly, more than weekly, with the SCU at this point. Relative to our certain person learning, we know that SCU and its members are committed to the educational well-being of all of our students and share our desires to see our students back in person as soon as possible. The parties continue to meet and bargain in good faith, and we remain optimistic about our timeline to get students back when the buildings are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Green. For the superintendent and others to answer this, a general question, there's several people ask a similar question. Can we commit to full-time in-person in the fall? What is the likelihood of that happening in the fall? Will the district be at 5 days in person in the fall? And Superintendent Skipper, that captures several people's questions.
Sure. So I, I think, I think our goal this summer is to be able to provide as much in-person as we're able to. That's something we're actively looking at right now, particularly for students who really struggled with the remote, and they may fall into categories such as our high needs special education, our English language learners, but it could also be our gen population. So I think that really the summer is the first phase, and that is something we're looking at right now because we want to plan for that. And the city has said from a resource standpoint that, they will work with us to make sure we have what we need for our students. I think in terms of the fall, our goal and our strongest desire is to be 5 days in person and to be able to have that be our reality again. That said, I think, in our conversations with some of our city folks, there are things, as the mayor brought up, like the variants of the virus, certainly the vaccines and what the status of the vaccines are. And then any kind of CDC or state regulations that may come out that we have to consider. And that would hold true for others as well. So those will be things that we will be taking a look at. But we want to figure out how to do that in the framework of being able to get our kids back in person and being able to serve them full time.
There are several questions going to Brown School. So there'll be a couple of parts, but this will capture several people's questions. Someone wants to send a kindergarten to the Brown. When will we find out that status? Will they be able to transfer their child so both kids are at the same school? When will there be further communication regarding the structural status of the school or its safety standards allowing people to attend? And when will we have general information about that? So first, on people who are making decisions around sending their kids as kindergartners, when will information be coming? Can they switch out? And then Rich, for you on the building side.
So I think they're very intertwined. I mean, I think at this point, I think it makes sense probably for Rich to first answer the question about the building and what the plan is in terms of next steps of conversation and survey. And then I can answer the what next in terms of the kindergarten.
In terms of the evaluation of the building, we're very early days right now, and we're developing the schedule for both the investigations and the evaluation on what needs to be done. A lot of the work that would need to be done triggers other code and ADA compliance work. So it's a rather complex equation. We're going to try to solidify a schedule to complete that work and communicate that schedule out as soon as possible.
Correct. And so if anyone is picking the Brown as a kindergarten location, and then, it comes that we can't start the school back there at the beginning of the year, the minute that we have that information, we will share with any of the parents who have selected that as their first choice for kindergarten, and then let them be able to choose another school. So we'll work across. This happens occasionally, where something does change and we have to then work with the group of parents who might be impacted. So we will try to give you as much information as possible, as quickly as we can on the building side. I know that Rich and I and Principal McGuire are having conversations about having a meeting for parents, likely sometime after February break, once Rich has some of the data back.
Thank you. That answers a follow-up question from Brennan Hall. From Michelle Lippens, has there been any discussion and/or planning for special education students to receive remediation over the summer in an attempt to alleviate the considerable regression that has occurred during the pandemic? This type of effort would require funding, staff, and considerable time to plan and implement, and I'm wondering when this will occur. Thank you, Michelle, for the question, and others as well. Mary?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So this is a conversation that happens on a regular basis. Director Trevisoni, do you want to just chime in on a few more of the specifics of what we're looking at?
Sure. So I can say when we're talking about compensatory services for regression, those are conversations that are happening with the individual IEP team meetings and have been happening with regards to planning for the summer or any way for achievement. As Mary had spoken, we're already thinking about the summer and planning for the summer, talking with some of our partnerships, talking with other people to try and figure out how we could best meet the needs of the students across, as well as looking at and planning for the fall and for next year to say what are things that we can do to expand the resources that we have and to support students in order to get the services and support needed.
Thank you, Rich. This is one's for you, Rich Raish. Ms. Pinsky asked Rich Raish presented at a recent school committee meeting that the city has dozens of portable HEPA units, HEPA, which could be deployed as a plan B for a safe reopening of classrooms. Ongoing delays causing significant harms to many children. Is it time for plan B? If not, why not? Maybe you can give the context behind that, Rich.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have, as I said, we're deploying those to where they were called for in the overall plan to support the overall building ventilation. As we've said, there are different uses that we've been ramping up ahead of the full scale implementation. And we communicate with Superintendent Skipper on almost a daily basis to refine this plan. I think if we start finding that we want to redeploy some of those to start getting a better head start on some of the high needs kids in certain rooms, we can certainly do that to help support higher density or more frequent touch on that. But from an educational program standpoint, we would support Mary and her crew on anything we would need to do on temporary redeployment of those to different areas.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you for the question. Amy M asks, will testing data from the community schools program be added to the Somerville Public Schools COVID dashboard? Kristen?
Hello, I can answer that, Mayor. So yes, when we have the testing data up on the dashboard, all of the data from the full SPS testing program will be folded in together. And then once students who are in the after school program are present for in-person, for those that will be possible for, they will be folded into the regular testing program and will not additionally be tested in the after school program.
Thank you. From Beatrice Gomez, are issues with deficiencies due to deferred maintenance issues in our schools? It is my understanding some school systems have not been touched for a decade. How is the city addressing the issue? Rich?
Yeah, so we are getting to the bottom of the ins and outs of the contract with the on-call maintenance provider. As it happens, that contract is due to expire. We were already in the process of improving that contract for its renewal, and this is informative in that process. And part of the discovery here will be finding out exactly how to better perform all that work in the future.
Right, yeah, I agree. And there will be more information to come on that. There was a question about when did the buildings fall in disrepair. The buildings are not in disrepair. I just want to make that clear. Our school buildings are actually the best buildings in the city, including the one I'm sitting in now in City Hall. There are several questions I just want to try to summarize regarding concerns around high school students and coming back to school. If we could clarify for parents, and I think this captures several questions. Are high school students coming back at all this year? Is there a plan for them? People have referred to the absence of any information on that and concern. I think this might be coming from the students as well. That's the general flavor of the questions, and I will ask any others that I missed in that summary. Mary?
Sure. So right now we're trying to get settled the high needs programming at the high school. We know for sure, it's a fully fit building. We know for sure the Winter Hill and the Healy are two buildings that do not have the option to go back to their building for some time. We are trying very hard to place all the other programs back into the original home school so that we may have additional space at the high school for high school students. That will get sorted out over this next month as Rich's chart becomes more narrow and we actually have more defined dates to be able to say this group will start then, this group will start then. For the high school students right now, we're looking at CT seniors and juniors. We're looking at special education students at the high school level, and we're looking at Ls at the high school level. Additionally, Principal Lagambina and his whole administrative team have been meeting in guidance to look at being able to run the equivalent of learning labs for various grades for students who are disengaged, not making good progress, to be able to come in to different pockets of the building and be able to do their studies there and get support. So in the traditional sense of the classes, that is likely not to happen. If it were, it would probably happen for one of the grades and it would probably happen after the April break. However, there will be opportunities for high school students in these various ways to be in the high school building, to be getting services, just not in the traditional sense of a regular schedule.
There's a couple of connected questions from, I believe, one of our students, Wilbert. Thank you, Wilbert, for the question. Will all students, including elementary school students, be tested as part of the testing program in the schools?
So this is a great.
Will.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Wilbert. That's a great question. The testing is available. It will be done on students who are in-person learning, who are entering into the school buildings.
And Wilbert, you had another question around scholastic sports. Would someone who plays sports have to take a COVID test before participating in sports? Those, school committee, I would say, has not adopted any, approved any plan regarding scholastic sports. The Greater Boston League and all the school leaders, including trainers and health committees, are going to be making a recommendation back in any safety protocols regarding requirements for participation that will be part of that. So I would say, Wilbert, stay tuned. That information should be coming back to school administrators within the next couple of weeks, I believe. And thank you for the questions again. From Julia Toof, do the summer plans for SPED potentially include 4 to 5 days a week for a class or camp? Would services be provided as well to make sure SPED students are caught up for the next grade year? Again, thank you for the question.
Yep. Thank you very much, Juliet. So this is a great question. It's something that we are working to, yes. And it's something that Director Trevisoni is already trying to line staff up for this, as well as programming that might not exist just in Somerville. Christine, I don't know if you want to talk about a few examples, such as the reading program and so forth.
Yeah, many of you may know we worked with Melissa Orkin out of Crafting Minds out of Tufts, and we're continuing to work with her to try and do another literacy program with her this summer for students, especially first and second grade students. We do, for any of our self-contained programs, we do always offer a 5-day program. And so we will continue to offer the 5-day program, and that does include services. And we are looking at other resources as well to bring in to support us in meeting the needs of all students.
Thanks. Lizbeth Ginsburg asked, what is the schedule for bringing kids back once a given building reopens? With younger kids prioritized, will older kids like middle schoolers actually get back into in-person schooling during this school year? Perhaps Marion, others can just supplement what you mentioned already.
Sure. So while we are following the phase in of phase 2A and 2B and 3A, which is age and special education and ELL need, those programs are actually heavier lifts because they often have a lot of different specific materials, equipment, staffing. So they take a bigger lift. As we start to get into like phase 4, where we're really talking about first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, those should be able to go quicker and they would be back in their buildings. Other than the Healy, as we said, pre-K to 3, which we have to sort of see on the Healy 4th grade up, if that will go back to the Healy. and then the Winter Hill. But everybody else at that point is kind of back in their building. So a lot of the stuff around the moving and the reorchestration that we're going through in the earlier programs won't be there. So we'll be able to go quicker on the back end of that.
Thanks. Corey Meehan, as a follow-up on the question regarding negotiations with the SEU, are they prepared, and maybe you can just supplement again, Mr. Green or others, that they are prepared to come back to the classroom once these building improvements are complete? Is it possible that those teachers who are not comfortable returning to the classroom can remain remote? And the idea of when teachers may get vaccines, can anything be done to expedite that? I'll speak to the vaccine piece, the vaccination. We are meeting, we've pushed this, not just we here in Somerville and other communities and districts express the need to, at least in a categorically elevate teachers and educators as part of school reopening plans. We are meeting with the Commonwealth this Friday with other regional leaders, and we hope we'll have more on this. It's a point of concern for many of us, but thank you for the question. In terms of the other remaining answer, either Mary or Andre.
Andre, I think you started to answer some of that in yours.
Right. I think it's fair to say that it is our strong desire to not force teachers back. A lot of our current negotiations are about what are the things we can do to reassure educators of the safety of our reopening plans. And that continues to be our focus. Is we firmly believe that the best way to have a safe and equitable reopening for all of our students is to have our teachers be partners in that. And so that is our goal.
Thank you. Omar, would you mind, we have two questions from Ms. Maria Lopez. They're in Spanish. I'm sure, do you see them? I can read out. I'm sorry, Omar, can you see them? They're at 7:45 and 7:46 p.m. I'm going to come back to those. Let me get you another one time. Omar, we'll come back in a second. Courtney Cook asked, what about access testing and MCAS testing? Superintendent?
So we're still getting updated guidance right now from the state on this. Access testing has been delayed up until the final window is in May. MCAS testing is slated to start in the April-May timeframe. There are other districts that are in our situation, which is that they're remote and they're phasing back in, or they plan to stay remote. And so there's a lot of questions right now to the commissioner's office around how that could potentially work. So that will be an example of something that will come as an update from us over the next couple of weeks as we get additional information. We actually have a AAAC meeting tomorrow that I'm hoping at the state level, and I'm hoping to get some information from.
Another question that's come in, we just have an initial S. Thank you to everyone who has worked on the school safety. Thank you for prioritizing safety. Can you please describe what the 3 virtual days of hybrid would potentially look like? Who will provide that instruction?
Sure. So Ms. Namaza, do you want to take a shot and then I'll chime in?
Sure. Mayor Curtoni, can you just read the beginning part of that? A truck drove by that was pretty loud and it faded out your voice.
Sure. I just had it in front of me. You had to call me on the spot. I believe what will
the 3 days, what will the 3 remote days look like?
And what will instruction look like, I believe, in conjunction?
So the three remote days will be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. The synchronous will be in the form of large group, small group, one-to-one with teachers, and the asynchronous will be based on lessons that students have already learned in person. I think we'll be looking to do similar kinds of things on Wednesdays with our mornings fully synchronous for 3 hours, and then some additional asynchronous activities in the afternoon. But all lessons will be based on what students have learned the 2 days that they were in person.
And then Mayor, for the question that was in Spanish, oh, sorry, Mary, did you want to respond to this previous question?
I just wanted to say that the goal also with coordination is to make sure that students have time with their teacher for some of that. That might be opening meetings, that might be check-ins, but the idea is that there's some connection to the class while they're remote and their classmates are in school. we also recognize the difficulty of trying to teach two groups. And so there'll be other people that will be helping support that. For instance, the remote specialists, if students are getting special education or ELL services, those may come through at that time. XBlock, their partner organizations like Citizen Schools or some of the other programming. So we'll be looking to try to build some of those things into the remote days so that we can maximize the in-person days with their teacher in-person activities. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thanks. So the question is, where can people get the flu vaccine because the clinics are currently closed? And so we still have Spanish translation. I don't know, Doug or Omar, if you want to answer it directly in Spanish.
Doug, you want to do it? I'll translate.
Sure.
Was that on the flu or COVID-19 vaccine?
The question was said flu, but I think maybe both might be helpful to answer.
Yeah, for the flu vaccine, you can still get the flu vaccine at your local pharmacy or your doctor's office. And we can still offer through the City of Somerville. Check with your school nurse and to find out when the next clinic will be available.
Okay, and you said there was no translation available right now? I can say it in Spanish. Para la persona que nos está escuchando, para la vacuna del flu, puede ir a su farmacia local, puede ir a su doctor o el doctor de sus niños, o puede hablar con la enfermera o las enfermeras o la gente que están en sus hijos escuelas, y pueden darle una fecha para que usted y sus hijos pueden acceder a la vacuna.
And for the COVID vaccine, the state is driving this currently, and the best place to check where you can be vaccinated and when you can be vaccinated is on the state's website.
Para la vacuna del COVID-19, lo que usted tiene que hacer es, opción número 1, puede ir al website del estado de Massachusetts, que tiene las diferentes fases para la gente que puede hacer la vacuna del COVID-19. En algunos días o una semana o dos, depende de cómo el estado decide del plan final, la ciudad va a tener su propio plan sobre su propio website y pueden hablar con la gente de la ciudad de este lado o puede hablar con la gente del lado de la escuela.
Thank you. I want to take one of the questions that came in on the YouTube comment, and we're going to go to about 8:15 since we couldn't start Q&A to a couple of minutes later. If the question, a couple of questions, Rich, I want to answer around the building work that we're doing. There were a few that asked pretty much, can someone please speak to why building mitigations did not start till November? If you can explain, we actually started the assessment earlier and to determine what we needed to do first. And then there was a question about remaining finances on it.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We did start the assessment to determine what it is that needed to be done in late summer. It took quite a while to assess all the buildings and prescribe what it is that needs to be done. As it happens, on buildings that have the centralized systems, they are fairly complex, and there are a number of different mechanical units. So specifying out the correct filters, the correct fan speeds, and then assessing to measure against what our thresholds were for air turnover and air filtration, and then deploying the portable filters where they needed to. It took some time to get all of that. Even through an expedited emergency procurement, we still have to follow certain rules under Massachusetts procurement law, because we are a public entity. Is not as simple as a private company hiring someone to do this. So we had to follow several rules, did that as expeditiously as possible, and spun up the work as fast as possible. So this is about as fast as it goes. And I did see one of the comments questioning the 7.5 million. All of that money, or with with construction contingency included, acknowledging the fact that we may find some unforeseen circumstances and we need additional funds, essentially all of that money is earmarked. And we have approved a few change orders along the way, some of which were to expedite delivery of certain equipment. But at this point, I would not forecast that we had substantial money left over from that appropriation.
And just so for context and to clarify, when we get authority to borrow, in this case, $7.5 million to do this work, we can't, if we don't spend 7.5 or we borrow what we need, if there's anything remaining in contingency, we're not allowed to use it for a different purpose. It can be for another construction purpose that still has, there's a certain rules on how you get that done, but not for scope or outside something else. So I just want to make sure that that was a good question and people understand that. From Jean Griffin, questions regarding, are there going to be sports and clubs available for the kids to get out of the house? Even the best of students are struggling socially and emotionally. A year of remote learning is a lot for kids to juggle and engage. I will start, those plans are being worked out, not just for the remainder of the school year, but how we can supplement during the summer. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the framework around which sports and official scholastic sports or club sports or other activities that will be presented in one, because I've been working closely with other municipal leaders and the league officials and presenting a health and safety plan for different school districts to consider for approval. And Madam Superintendent, I don't know if you want to add to that. And thank you for the question, Jean.
Yeah, I would just say it's a great question. I would just say that, you know, any of the clubs that could meet outdoors, for instance, we could fully support. It may be also that we'll be able to support the clubs once the buildings are set. In terms of the rec, we are in conversation with the rec about getting the tents put back up again, both the ones we purchased and the ones the rec have, and to see what kind of programming the rec may be able to run in the late spring in conjunction with community schools as we expand it. We're also anticipating community schools will run for the summer as well. So we're actively trying to bring other partners in, knowing that we want to be able to use the summer and next year as a way to get kids to fully re-engage.
From Renee Goodridge, will the in-person days be full days, 8-ish to 2:30? That's the question from Renee. Thank you for the question. Mary?
So right now, yes, I will say with the exception of when we begin with our highest need special education students, one of the things that we're looking at right there is the potential for half days at the beginning as a way to be able to kind of get our routines through, identify what kinds of issues come up. So there may be some staggering in there, you know, of what the day looks like, particularly for the group 1s and the 2s.
From Luciana, given the difficulty into hiring speech therapists to replace the ones who left before Thanksgiving, what is the plan for the students who are currently not having speech therapy, compensatory services during the summer or something earlier?
Correct. Christine, do you want to address that?
We have actively been trying to hire speech and language pathologists all year. We actually have contracted with a variety of agency supports. And so we are already beginning to look at doing some compensatory services with the agencies as we move forward. And we would make up some of that time during the summer and into the fall. But we interview every single week. I think we are up to 3 speech and language pathologists that we've been able to bring on board. And we hope to bring on more.
Thank you. I had a question from Megan Bowe and I just lost it. It speaks to, I'm going to summarize if I recall it correctly, how confident we are in our protocols for sanitizing as one of the factors we control internally. She referenced, you know, in years past, we've been asked by teachers to bring in wipes and so forth. I will say, I'll start off and leave off to others. Megan, thank you for the question. I hope I summarized it correctly. We're very confident. I'd submit, I appreciate when teachers ask people to be engaged and bring supplies in. We don't have an issue around resources and paying for those things. And we have very high standards and protocols. And I'll leave it to others on this call, to Jeff and perhaps Kristen, how we are going to monitor that one of those internal factors involved in our COVID response.
I can start, Jeff, or if you, So one of the ways that we're monitoring this is tracking compliance with the cleaning protocols. So my team is working with DPW. There will be clipboards throughout the schools. So people need to check off when they've done certain key items, and that is going to be monitored closely. Members of my team also work closely with our operations team to make sure that we have sufficient PPE and are working with the schools on that. So PPE, personal protective equipment, including wipes, gloves, masks, all these things. And so we should be well stocked. I know that there was a big order placed for the schools that should be able to carry us well through the end of this academic year. And Jeff, if you'd like to add anything.
Thanks, Kristen. I'd just add, part of the documents we published on the reopening page include a checklist of the agreed upon procedures that DPW will follow in terms of the deep clean and the daily clean. And those are procedures that have been in place with the community school students that have come back into the building. So we are we're trying these things out in real time and making sure that they are to the standards that we want them to be.
Thanks.
And I would say that,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
sorry, I would just say that that also holds true that with the staff that's in the buildings, during the day. And we've done a number of trainings, and we'll continue to do that both for staff, but also for parents so that students become more comfortable understanding what's going to be expected of them.
Mary, can I add? I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I met with the school nurses with regards to our current PPE supply and all the equipment that we have, and they said we far exceeded any expectations that they had about the level of PPE that we have available for staff and students. So we're well stocked in that.
Great. Thank you. Again, from Courtney Cook, what does group 1 and group 2 mean? Sometimes it's referred to as school names, sometimes as group numbers. It's confusing. Can we just add clarification for Courtney, please, and others?
Yeah, sorry about that. That is our shorthand because we talked about it so much. So the group 1 consists of the Argenziano, the Capuano, and the West. The group 2 consists of the East and the Mods, and the group 3 schools refer to the Kennedy, the Healy, and the Winter Hill. And that just has to do with the way we procured the contracts because we wanted to expedite the work and have multiple contractors be available to bid on it. We broke it up into those 3 schools, and they're being run simultaneously, but they do have some commonalities as to why we broke it up into those 3 groups.
From the YouTube chat, again, we'll take a few more questions. We'll try to get as many as possible from Edgar Flores Ramos. So will CTE sophomore students not return to school this year either?
So I think, Edgar, that's one of the things we're going to look at. We need to get the other buildings situated to know how much space is still available. I think right now with the seniors and the juniors, they're finishing their studies. And so the hands-on piece is extra important. But we recognize for all CTE students, even the sophomores and those going through exploratory, any amount of time that they could spend in the vocational area, in the CTE area, would be a benefit. So that is something that we're not ruling any of that out. Right now, the plan is just including juniors and seniors, but we are actively talking about other groups of students.
Thank you, Edgar. From Gabrielle Jacquet, how is the district supposed to plan and prepare for student return when the building timeline seems to change from each meeting to the next? It's a fair and valid question. I'd submit, and let me clarify and then Rich state, we are fully aware that in order for the school department to plan, they need a 3-week heads up. We like nothing to more say, this is the date. We are doing this, it may not feel that way, or just not get into the boring bureaucracy of how we have to procure a bid and do these projects. It's usually more than a year. And we're condensing it in a very tight timeline. That means we don't have a lot of runway when we run into unforeseen circumstances. So that color chart, which talks about risks, as Rich mentioned earlier, it changes almost daily. When we approach what we perceive or categorize something as a risk, sometimes it's not the risk to the level that we projected. Sometimes it's more, and that's why it's dynamic every day. It's sooner or later we're going to get to that point. We just want to be accurate and genuine with the information we're given, and that's what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And So which is why we give a pessimistic, optimistic, good case, worst case scenario for the schools, doing our best to hit that affirmative date. Rich, did you want to add anything to that? And thank you for the question.
Yeah, and acknowledging that it is a complex thing to digest, and I fully understand and empathetic towards any complexity that SPS has to absorb in this planning. But again, what the goal is to get the priority students into the schools in a way that is least disruptive to the families, right? So it's multivariate. We want to minimize transportation. We want to fast track these things. And so we've taken the stance that we would be as open and transparent with the communication of the progress of the work and the risks inherent in the work, so that SPS can do that planning as best they can. And we acknowledge that it can be frustrating for the families, because we're not standing here and saying, this is the date that your student will go to this building. But if we took that approach, we would simply say, everyone comes back September 1st, 2021. That's not acceptable to us, it's not acceptable to anybody. So, while we beg everyone's forgiveness for that level of complexity and absorbing that much information, it is the best and fastest way to get students back into the buildings with the least disruption to families.
And thank you for that, Rich. From Sophia, I'm going to give it a shot. Sophia Poveda Kolokitis. Has the city reached out, I'm sorry, Sophia, reached out to the state for special vaccine shipments designated for vulnerable communities? Would teachers be prioritized for vaccinations as other cities have done? We are stressing to the state. First, we've heard about other communities doing that. That is not allowed by the Commonwealth. Other communities have been addressed for that. We are advocating in terms of categorizing the teachers at a higher level to assist with reopening. In terms of advocating for vaccine shipments for vulnerable communities, absolutely. I don't want to get into the details now. We will be speaking more. I've been speaking publicly today. The state has no vaccination plan. They have sites they've been putting up. We have the capacity in Somerville and our plans to vaccinate anywhere from 700 to 1,000 people per day. Right now, we're getting 100 shipments per week. I'm encouraged. The only good news is the president, Biden, has said he's ordering 200 million more doses of vaccines and is going to push for 1.5 million vaccinations per day. We need to make sure we submit the Somerville plan. Our approach stresses equity. That means people who are the most vulnerable, that hit hardest by the vaccines, have access to get it. Right now, we can't. I think our opposition or concern has been that you have to be able to use a laptop or a smartphone to make an appointment and use a car to go get vaccinated. That's not what we want. We advocating and doing. Again, we have a meeting this Friday with members of the administration, along with other municipal leaders, to stress that point. We'll have more to come very soon, and we are advocating that point, and I appreciate the question. Thank you. I'm going to try to take a couple more before we wrap up, especially from people who haven't had a chance, had their questions answered. And if we don't get your question asked or answered, please feel free to follow up with us. Megan Bowe asked again, what's the plan if a student or teacher tests positive? I'd ask Megan to take a look at the slides that'll be posted. You can look at the link in the chat function. It'll tell you how the pool testing operation will work. Stephanie Travasos asks, are we still cohorting? Mary?
I'm sorry, say that again, Mayor.
Are we still cohorting?
We are still cohorting, yes.
Correct.
Right.
Cohort A, cohort B.
Thank you. Alyssa Hurley asks, is there any plan for community schools to try to get the Brown School kids indoor at all? Perhaps we can elaborate. I saw on the slide, we talked about mid-February. Can we just have a supplement that answer for Ms. Hurley?
Yeah, so I think Jeff or Rosanna, do you want to take that? It is one we're actively talking about.
Yeah, we met on this today. We're trying to make sure we have appropriate space. We will definitely have COVID testing capacity for that site available, I believe, the first week of February. And so as soon as we have space that we feel comfortable having a small number of students in, we'll share that out with families.
Leah Rachel Cohen This will be one of the last few questions here. What will it take to move to full in-person instruction? For example, once all teachers are vaccinated, will students be able to return in person? Assuming distancing measures are still required, given that a vaccine is not available for those under 16, is there enough space for everyone to return to school and maintain distance?
So, I mean, these are some of the questions that we will look at once we have some additional information on the vaccine and what the vaccine protects. Is it just the individual? Is it transmission? What's the CDC guidelines in terms of 6 foot? Does it get dropped to 3 feet? We've mapped out the vast majority of our classes, and at 3 feet, there's not a real issue. At 6 feet, there obviously is, because it's designed to have the population. So these are some of, as we sort of talked about at the beginning, they're excellent questions. They're the ones that we're looking for information as it evolves so that we can develop our guidelines in hopes that we are able to bring everybody back full-time in person. But we do need to have the science weigh in on it.
Thank you. These will be the last 3 questions. And again, folks, if we didn't get to your question, please follow up with us. We will try to capture everything and answer them as well. And you feel free to reach out to us directly. From Joel Bennett, hi, all the acronyms are confusing. I agree, Joel. Where will 9th through 12th graders be going to school? Thanks, Joel. Thank you for the question.
So, so as we were saying, in terms of 9th through 12th, there's certain populations like CTE, such as special education, high school level, and English language learners, high school level, that will be doing classes at Somerville High. There will also be learning labs of different formats based out of the houses, and then potentially based out of guidance, to be able to give students who are high schoolers opportunity who are struggling with the remote. Once we get a sense, Joel, of the what amount of real estate we have to use at the high school, and again, we're trying very much to use what's out in the schools as they come on, then we will know what we have left to be able to get back to Somerville High so that we can come up with a plan for additional high schools. So right now, the short answer is they will continue remote, but that is a plan that as the rest of the building plan evolves, we will go back and look at for the April and May timeframe.
I was inaccurate. These are the last 3. James Demchenko asked, why weren't these schools consistently monitored for filtration flow, knowing there is a flu season every year? It's a valid question. And someone I advocated when we moved to upgrade the airflow standards that, and experts have told us overall, this is going to improve the health long-term for staff, teachers, and students. But Rich, if you could just briefly explain why we actually adopted a higher standard than we are required to do for this case.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Again, with the exception of the Brown, most of the schools already had air handling systems with the MERV 8 filters. We stepped up to the MERV 13 because we're in the middle of a pandemic and wanted to increase it. I do think it is the right thing to do. It may have been the pandemic that was the reason why the city council could easily approve $7.5 million to do this sort of thing. But it is the right thing to do in the long term. And these, are things that the overall systems are monitored, and we are looking to improve that monitoring moving forward as we renew the ongoing maintenance contract.
Thank you. And from Aaron H., will protocols include double masking since Dr. Fauci and others are now recommending this due to the new variants?
I don't know if Doug or Kristen want to weigh in on their thoughts on that.
So we're going to be looking at that, and keep in mind currently what the Dr. Fauci and others are saying is really about the new variants that are coming through, and feeling that some of those are more effective. I think in general, what we want to look at is a 3-layer mask, and that's the important piece of it. Many a times what we're seeing is that people are only using a 1-layer mask, which isn't enough, and really looking at the idea of how many layers we're putting on those masks. A lot of people we see are using the gaiters, which we are not recommending at all. Those are not a good covering. They have too many holes in them. So that's why we look at the idea of making sure that we have the proper masks when we're opening our schools and what we're having inside of the schools. So we'll keep an eye on that and modify and update our policies and recommendations as we move forward.
And Doug, just if you can answer, because Ruth Foreman along those lines asked, with the data showing that surgical masks provide better filtration/protection than cloth masks, is there a plan to provide surgical masks to students and staff daily?
So I'll let the superintendent talk about the masks that they will be providing. But again, a lot of those the cloth masks that we've been finding are only a single layer and possibly a double layer. And again, we're recommending a three layer mask.
Yeah. So, and that's what we've ordered, is the 3-layer surgical.
And finally, from Amy M, how long are you anticipating waiting between each phase once this gets started? A week, 2 weeks, more?
So this is a great question. Our hope is a week. Our hope is that we're able to sort of continue to bring kids back and use that week to be able to get everything situated. In the earlier phases, it may be in groups in 2A and 2B. It may take slightly longer because it also involves getting transportation set up. And so that is an extra layer. But once we get into like the pre-K and the K, we should be able to move much more rapidly.
Thank you. I'll hand off to superintendent after I say a couple words. Thank you for everyone for joining us. I know we went over, but we tried to answer as many questions that captured everyone's comments or questions as possible. Again, if you have further questions, please follow up with us directly. We'll try to see if we missed any. If you want to see the slides, the recording will be available of this meeting will be available at somervillema.gov/virtual town hall. It's in the chat function. And we will be back to meet with all of you, update you regularly as things evolve, and they will continue to evolve. And we're all in committed to get everyone back in a very safe and sustainable way, and to do whatever we need to do to supplement and provide the resources to the children in our community and the families to get them back up for what they missed as much as possible. We know there's a lot of need. We're acutely aware there's been an immeasurable amount of impact, and we are committed to that. Madam Superintendent, would you like to close us out?
Sure. I just want to echo the mayor. You know, it's been the most disruptive year for you as your families and for educators. Our goal is to get our students back and to have our buildings be safe and to have our testing running the way that it needs to. And so we're definitely making progress toward that. I think going into February, we will be starting back up with sort of our weekly informational updates. And so even if it's small things that we can update on, I think it'll be important for you to see the progress as we're making our way toward March, where that will be the crux of when we're able to bring back a good number of the schools. So thank you again for all your help, your questions, your patience, you know, pushing in the areas to help us to expand that could help, such as community schools. You know, it's why we're such an amazing city and such an amazing community. So we look forward to being able to deliver and to get our kids back, get our staff back, and we'll look forward to giving you updates of that on a weekly basis now going forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.